Today is Sunday, December 5th, 2021, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. We come to you on the Sunday morning following an absolutely horrendous and heartbreaking week. Oxford, Michigan joined the roster of places like Columbine, Sandy Hook, and Parkland, a list to which no one aspires. You know, this year there have been more than 24 school shootings in the U.S. They are still quite rare, thankfully. I mean, there are nearly 27,000 high schools in the country. But this uniquely American horror has become commonplace enough that when it came to Oxford this week, NBC didn't even lead their nightly newscast with it. The day after it happened, the news compendium of the Drudge Report didn't have one item about the Oxford shooting, though they did include a link to a story about how much money people betting on football had lost in November. No, these god-awful events don't register like they used to unless you're right in the middle of them. And then, of course, it changes you forever. That is, if you're lucky enough to survive it. I wish I was more optimistic about stopping them, but if we couldn't create the resolve after Sandy Hook, well, but maybe with Oxford now enlisted in the fight, a new answer will start to emerge. Certainly the County Prosecutor Karen McDonald is eager to give it a try. She wasted no time at all in talking about the need to address responsible gun ownership, which in hindsight was a clue that she was poised to charge the suspect's parents, which she did. We're going to talk with her in just a moment. And a week after the Thanksgiving get-togethers, COVID cases remain chillingly high in Michigan. Our hospitals remain stretched. What does the new Omicron variant mean to all of that? We'll talk about that with the Michigan Health and Human Services Director, Elizabeth Hertel. It's all today on Flashpoint. As you now know, there was a fair amount of chaos following the filing of charges against James and Jennifer Crumbley on Friday. They were eventually taken into custody early Saturday morning in Detroit. Interestingly, yesterday, Sheriff Mike Bouchard said he doubts Ethan Crumbley knows that his parents have been arrested and that they are in the same jail with him because he's being held in isolation. But just after the charges were announced Friday, I had a chance to talk with Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald about her decision to charge the parents, which to me appeared to be her inclination from her very first remarks about the shooting.
It was so horrific, and I understand that we train children to what to do with when an active shooter is in the building, and we have protocols for law enforcement, and they've all been followed. But yet we had 4 children murdered and 7 others injured, not to mention all of the kids who were present and totally terrorized. And so I guess my thought was, well, how did this individual, the shooter, get access to that weapon? And that first question led to a series of facts that just left it completely out of the question that I not charge the mom and the dad. It was clear from social media posts that the weapon was bought for him. He had easy access to it. It was not safely secured. He essentially considered it his gun. And there were some warning signs here that were ignored. He was searching for ammunition on his phone the day before the shooting. Right. School was concerned, called home, no response at all, except a text message from mom to her son saying, asking about it, and then saying, well, LOL, next time don't get caught. There was the meeting on the day of the shooting early with the drawings he had made that were really, really troubling and almost impossible not to interpret as a threat of violence. Mom and dad sat down in that meeting, school officials, and the shooter was there with his backpack, and we now believe that the gun was in his backpack. In fact, I wanted to ask you about that. And I don't really know what a student's rights are in school. Was it within the school's rights to search the backpack? I suppose his parents certainly could have, but does the school have the right to search that backpack? Absolutely. But you know, I'm not in a position, because we haven't investigated or looked at part of the case with regard to the school officials. But what I do know is that at that point, mom and dad knew that he had a weapon. They knew that he had access to the weapon at any time. And then at that point, they knew that he was making threats of violence and yet did nothing except promise to get counseling within 48 hours. And so he was sent back to class.
Of course, I'm not an attorney, but there's something that strikes me as an interesting dichotomy. You've decided to charge the defendant, the suspect in the shooting, as an adult, and yet are we not treating his parents as if charging the parents, is that not then again treating him as a juvenile? Kind of sort of having it both ways, and maybe both things are possible at the same time, but is there not a split in the way that the two sets of defendants are being treated?
No. First and foremost, however their son is treated in the criminal justice system does not relieve any burden from their job as parents and allowing easy access to a gun to someone who they knew was dangerous. That it doesn't impact their burden or duty at all. With regard to charging him the way that he was charged, I didn't take that decision lightly. I campaigned on treat kids like kids, and I believe that. However, in Michigan, we don't have good options for violent juveniles, meaning if he were charged as a juvenile, there's a chance he could be released at age 21. And I didn't want to risk that. And after I saw the evidence, there was no way I was going to do that. I was just not going to do that. He needed to be facing those serious charges. And, we don't really know a lot about his past, and we'll find that out, and we'll determine the best solution and consequence, but that's for much further down the road. But I had to pick the path that gave us the most certainty that we would have control over no release at the age of 21.
This is being largely described by many other watchers around the country as being sort of a landmark approach that you're taking to involve the parents. And we've seen, in fact, we've had more than 24 school shootings in America this year. Did it strike you as a different approach, one that we haven't tried before? And does that make it that much more difficult to prove?
So I didn't consider whether it had been done before. And I do want to say that I do have tremendous compassion and empathy for parents who have children who are struggling and who are suffering from mental health issues. I certainly am not saying that parents should be criminally prosecuted for a violent act of their child across the board. However, in this instance, their actions went far beyond negligence. The shooting took place just minutes after the shooting, and there would be no way of the public knowing exactly what was occurring right at that time. But mom sent a text to her son saying, "Don't do it." Dad, upon hearing that there was an active shooter, did not call or go check on his son. He drove to his home to see if the gun was still there, and then called 911 and said, my gun's missing, the gun is missing, and I think my son might be the shooter. So they had every reason, and the evidence suggests that they did, to be concerned or consider the possibility that he was going to commit deadly force. And they allowed it, and they didn't say anything, and they didn't stop it, and they didn't say, "Let's look at your backpack." They didn't say, "We need to let you know that he has access to a gun." They didn't say, "Let's take him home. This is really disturbing." They just left him there.
Yeah.
And on behalf of those children's parents, I will absolutely hold them accountable for that, and I think that they should. And I've heard the first time it's happened, I didn't consider that, and I actually don't care. I just think this is the right thing to do.
I can't imagine there was an parent anywhere who wasn't boiling mad at listening to you describe the course of events on Friday morning. While you clearly believe you've got the law on your side, you also believe that there are some holes in Michigan law when it comes to firearms and the way that they need to be secured in a home.
Well, we do not have a safe storage law in Michigan, so gun owners are not required by law to secure their weapon and store the ammunition separately. They're not required by law. However, most gun owners that I know are responsible gun owners, and that is exactly what they do. And I have heard from parents all over the country, and they're gun owners, and they have said over and over and over, I would never, ever consider having a weapon in my home that is not secured properly and not far away from any kid in the house would have access.
The last thing I need to ask you about is the terrorism charge. That's also, I think, struck many people as unusual and a different tactic to take. But to explain your reasoning on that case.
Because we charge first-degree murder for the deaths and killing of these 4 kids, and we charged assault with intent to murder for the other children that were struck by gunfire. But when I looked at that, it was clear to me there was no criminal charge that reflected this entire set of victims, which are the children and the students in that school who fled for their lives, who hid under desks, who sent their mothers and fathers text messages saying, I love you, and I think I'm going to get shot. They can't eat, they can't sleep. They watch their friends be killed in a brutal, awful manner, and they will never be the same. And if that isn't terror, I don't know what is.
You've kept your focus on the victims through this whole thing, and they deserve mention again at this moment, those who've been killed. Hannah St. Juliana, Devin Scillian, Tate Meir, and Madison Baldwin. Thank you so much, Karen, for your time today. I know you've got a million requests coming in. Really appreciate it. I know we'll be talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
You bet.